Hello and welcome everybody. Today I would like just to show you the best examples from the games of Alexander Morozevich, who included into his repertoire the Albin's counter gambit as one of the weapons in his black's repertoire. So, after d4, d5, c4, e5, d takes e5 and d4, Morozevich played a few quite, I would say, spectacular games. Also against the Vasilin Topalov from the Amber Rapid tournament. Also against the Ivan Sokolov in the Chorus Weekend Z tournament 2005. In 2005 also, Morozevich beat Grandmaster Igor Henkin in the Mainz Ordix Open Rapid tournament. And later on, his friend Rustam Kasimjanov also started to use this sharp opening line in his practice, and also quite successfully. I would like to pay attention that even Hikaru Nakamura played a few games with the Albin's counter gambit, so you can realize that it's quite fresh and quite popular even today on the GM level, on the Grandmasters level. But I guess that the most popularity, this opening line, is and deserves after Alexander Morozevich beat Boris Gelfand in Amber tournament in 2004, and this game I would like to show you. d4, d5, c4, e5, d takes e5, d4. So Boris Gelfand is well-known classical player. So Boris usually plays according to the opening rules, and he continued knight f3, knight c6, and g3, which is the main line of the Albin's counter gambit as white. So white is planning to fan Kedin bishop on g2 and make a short castle, and only then to decide what to do about this d4 pawn. As we looked in our previous lesson, that black could play bishop g4 or bishop e6 plan with the forthcoming idea queen d7, and then maybe to play bishop to h3, trying to exchange light square bishop, or even prepare the long castle. Indeed, in the recent practice, most popularity deserves this knight e7 move, which also was played by Morozevich. So black immediately tries to bring the knight to g6, only then to decide about the future of black's bishop. So exactly following the principle of greatest world champion Capablanca, who said that first of all, please develop your knights, because knights have more or less the obvious squares to be developed, like in his position, knight on c6, and only then decide where to move your bishop, because bishops are long, just very powerful pieces, so we can decide where to develop the bishop, on f5, on g4 or e6, but only later on. So long range pieces, bishops, always could find the better opportunities than knights, where knights are always looking for the obvious squares. And knight is going to g6, of course. After bishop g2 and knight g6, black is already threatening to capture the pawn on e5. So now, in case of short castling, black instantly could capture on e5. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and the position is rather complicated, so it's not so easy to show here the advantage for white. So black is just intending to bring the bishop to e7, then short castling, and we are not threatening right now to capture the pawn on c4, because queen a4 check, so this double attack and fork on the knight on c4, please never miss. Indeed, it's not so simple for white to play for any advantage. Let's say after knight d2, bishop e7, knight f3, knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, and short castling, I can find any serious advantage for white. So I guess position is rather complicated or even more close to be equal. So what happened instead? So Gelfand decided immediately to protect the pawn. To protect the pawn on e5. But how? Immediately to play bishop a4 is not so nice, because black could just simply capture on f4 and then maybe to play f6. And after e takes f6, queen takes f6, black is getting not just equal game, but I guess slightly better position, since for white it's extremely difficult to protect this pawn on f4. Once again, pay attention that queen d2 will be met by very unpleasant shot bishop b4, and white has to give up immediately in the opening. Bishop f4 is not playable, so that's why white has to play bishop g5. And this move is quite tricky one. So because now if black plays f6, white simply captures and plays with the bishop on d2, keeping the extra pawn. Of course, black is having some compensation, but it's not the same. Like usually we started in the Albin's control gambit. So black's king side is completely destroyed. So black's only chance to go with the king on the queen side were also white already quite ready for the queen side attack after queen a4, b4, and b5. So f6 cannot be recommended, and the move like bishop e7, once again after bishop takes e7, black has no time for capturing with the queen on e7. Pay attention, this pawn under attack, so knight takes d4 is possible, and white is achieving much better position. No compensation for a pawn. So it's no time for black to play bishop e7, but queen d7 is the only move, and this is the main theoretical receipt. Now once again black is threatening to capture an e5. Short casting, and now black played h6. That's exactly the point. So bishop has to move. If you move now bishop to d2, then black just simply capturing the pawn on e5 and obtaining quite similar position which we analyzed a few moves before. So if white is trying to play here for any advantage, has to play bishop f4, keeping control over the e5 square, but allowing black to capture on f4. So that's exactly Morozevich is doing. Knight takes f4, g takes f4. Despite the fact black is having pawn down, white's pawn structure e5 and f4 cannot be called so good protected. So black easy could break through on the king side after brilliant move, which was found of course by Alexander Morozevich. g7, g5. Black is trying to open the position completely on the king side. So it's absolutely necessary for activating our bishops and the rooks, of course. We are trying to improve also the situation in the center. So it's important in that case to get rid of white's pawn on f4. Now, easy to see that after f take g5 and h take g5, knight take g5, black already could play knight takes e5 and open h file and threats over the g file later on. Next could be coming rook g8, so just gives black full compensation for a sacrificed material. Of course, Gelfand is trying to avoid such variations and try to continue the development. Knight to d2, g takes f4 and knight e4, very tempting continuation. So white is trying to make the shot knight f6, and Alexander Morzevich, of course, covering the f6 square. So here later analysis showing that instead of played bishop e7, even much better was to play bishop g7, after which this is so difficult for white to find any good way to keep even equalized game. So after bishop e7, the position is still very unclear. Indeed, after queen d2 and queen g4, black is threatening attack on the king side. So how to stop rook g8? So light square bishop is also coming into the game very soon. All according to the rules, black was trying to open up the position for the activating the bishop's pair. At the same time, white's king side is now quite vulnerable. King h1, bishop f5. White didn't find any solution and play knight takes d4, but this allows black to play rook d8. And Boris Gelfand sacrificed his queen after knight takes f5 and after rook takes d2. Knight takes e7. Tempo tactics, because now white is ready knight f6 check, so it's no time for black's rook to get away from the attack of the white's knight on e4. So black has to play king takes e7, knight takes d2. From the first sign it looks like quite good compensation for white. Indeed, queen takes e2, knight f3 and rook g8. Unfortunately, all white's pawns on the queen side and very active position of black's king is not allowing white to reach serious counterplay. As a result, black is much better in this position and should realize his material advantage. b3, knight b4, Morozevich immediately activating his knight. So knight is threatening to come to d3 and knight takes f2. Knight d4, queen g4, threatening the checkmate. Once again, Morozevich using tactics. It's not possible to play bishop takes on b7, because after f3 the game is over. So bishop takes f3 will be met by queen takes d4 and knight takes f3 by queen g2 checkmate. And rook g1 looks like only, and the greatest solution for white is also lost position after queen takes d4 and rook takes g8 will be met by queen takes a1. So don't forget that rook on a1 is hanging. So when bishop cannot capture on b7, there is no any counterplay anymore. Bishop e4, rook g5, so avoiding any tricks with rook g1 and with knight f5 check. Rook g1, queen d7, once again attacking the knight on d4. Knight f3, rook takes g1, rook takes g1, knight d3, attacking the pawn on f2, rook g2, c6, bishop h7, a5, and here already in the time trouble. White, but after knight e5, resigned because black is intending f3, black is intending queen d1 check. Still extra queen and no any compensation. Knight f5 check, all of course will be met by simple move. King f6, not king f8 of course, because rook g8 check. It is quite easy to miss in the blind tournament game, but of course not for the greatest player like Alexander Morozevich, so of course he planned to answer king f6, and white has no any defense against incoming queen d1 check or f3 or whatever. So in that great game, Alexander Morozevich showed the great potential of black's control play in the center and on the king side in the Albin's contour gambit. So the opening stage in this situation are not typical for the standard gambit continuation which we just learn already for so many months. And of course important for you also to know the theory, also to understand ideas, also to know what plan you would like to perform in this or in that position in the very sharp water of the Albin's contour gambit. And I would like just to show you a few opening lines which were played by Alexander Morozevich against different players, and how he achieved just very significant counterplay. Against Veselin Topalov in 2005, d4, d5, c4, e5, d takes e5, d4, knight f3, knight c6, a3, knight e7. So Morozevich still continued his firm plan. After b4 he is trying to play knight g6. So black is going to win back the pawn and achieving quite a good position. Bishop b2. White is trying to counterattack the pawn on d4, but strong continuation. a5, b5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and knight takes e5. And when Veselin Topalov decided to use the potential idea of all this line with e3, so now black just cannot capture on e3. Black also cannot capture on c4 because after e3, so c4 pawn has been protected. Morozevich, even getting into a surprising situation, finds the best resource, bishop e6. According to our rules, just continues the development of all his pieces. After bishop e6, bishop takes d4, and knight takes c4, queen c2, and knight e6. White got some kind of pressure in the center. Indeed, after bishop d3 and queen g5, position rather complicated. So at the same time, black is intending to capture on b5. Also, the g2 pawn is under attack. After f4, queen h4 check, g3, queen h5, knight c3, and knight f5, black got quite promising position after the opening. And after the 38 moves, Topalov resigned. So Veselin Topalov even succeeded to finish successfully this game. One more interesting game played against Ivan Sokolov in 2005. Started with the same opening line, Albin's contour gambit. And after knight f3, knight c6, Ivan Sokolov played quite rare move, knight b to d2, knight e7, knight b3. So white immediately trying to win the pawn on d4. So instead of trying to get rid of this pawn with the pawn's move like e3, so white just simply moved his knight to b3, trying to win black's center pawn and the key pawn in the Albin's counter gambit on d4. Indeed, white just spent time, so wasting energy also. Knight is not getting into the center anymore, so black answering knight f5. Already intending at some point to play bishop b4, intending at some point to run with the pawn after a5 and a4. a3, bishop e7, g3, a5, queen d3, a4, knight b to d2, and important now to prevent white also from pushing g4, h5. So black is playing on the both flanks, also a5, a4, also h5, with idea maybe to push the pawn after h4, maybe with idea to play g5 and g4. Still trying to keep the initiative in his hands. Bishop h3, g6, knight e4, h4, bishop f4. So here also possible probably to play bishop e6. Indeed, Morozevich just captured on g3 also, got very interesting, very promising position and won after 34 moves. But this game was extremely sharp. One more, played against Grandmaster Igor Henkin. So also I would like just to show you the opening part of the game, that it's not so easy for white to reach any advantage. So what is Igor Henkin against Alexander Morozevich? After d4 and d5, c4, e5, d takes e5 and d4, knight f3, knight c6, g3, knight e7, bishop g2. So it's quite similar what exactly happened in the game of Alexander Morozevich against Boris Gelfand. So indeed, after bishop g2 and knight g6, no, not bishop g5 anymore, not bishop f4, but Igor Henkin played queen a4. So avoiding knight takes e5 at the same time, and also targeting black's pawn on d4. So in some point, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, and bishop takes c6 under threat. Bishop b4 check, knight bd2, and short castling. So instead trying to contradict immediately white's queen a4 move, instead Morozevich just simply moved his bishop to b4 and made short castling. So now position is rather complicated. After a3, bishop e7 and short castling, a5, rook d1, and knight c2 takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, knight f3. Morozevich reached equal game after knight takes f3, bishop takes f3, and bishop f6. So white is not having here any advantage. Black is intending to play next c6 and queen e7. So bishop from c8 could go to f5 or even maybe to the h3. Black is having quite safe position in the center and no much troubles. Okay, later on, also one more game I'd like to show you, played by Rustam Kasimjanov against Nikita Vityugov in Kerry's Memorial Rapid Tournament in 2006. In this game was tested is a classical idea. So we to go against Kasimdzhanov. D4, D5, C4, E5, D takes E5, D4, Knight F3, Knight C6, G3, Knight G to E7, Bishop G2, Knight G6, Bishop G5, and Queen D7. So that's exactly the position we are studying from the game between Gelfand and Morozevich. And here Gelfand played short castling, but the theory says that after E5, E6, white has to keep slightly better position. The problem is that E6 move forced black to capture on E6 with the pawn, because queen takes E6 cannot be played. Pay attention about this. D4 pawn. D4 pawn is under attack. So F takes E6 necessary. Indeed, even here the position is very sharp. After short castling and E5, Knight BD2 and H6, Bishop H4, and Queen F7. So black is ready now to develop his light square bishop. A3, Bishop F5. So this rather complicated situation. Queen A4, Queen D7, Knight B3, Bishop D6. I can't say that white got any advantage out of this opening line. So black is threatening to go with the short castling, keeping strong center. All black pieces quite good placed, and pay attention about this bishop, white's bishop on H4. I can't say that white any better in this situation. So what we just showed in today's lesson, just modern ideas in the Albin's counter gambit. So what way exactly white is trying to get the advantage, and that even in very sharp opening lines like the Albin's counter gambit, always black is having good counter chances. A lot of options for the counterplay. And I would like you also to think, to consider seriously including this Albin's counter gambit into your repertoire. If Nakamura, Morozevich, and Kasimdzhanov could play, so why not you? Thanks everybody for watching. If you have any question, just contact me on my webpage www.chesslessons.wordpress.com, and I will be happy to answer all your questions. See you next time. Bye.